Welcome back to Cosmic Comics. Today we take a look at the first appearance of what will become one of the most powerful characters within the Marvel Universe. The story takes place in Fantastic Four, Volume 1, Issue number 20, published in 1963, written by Stan Lee and art by Jack Kirby. The issue opens with Reed studying a meteor he purchased from a farmer whose property it fell upon. He's attempting to get to the center of the meteor, but none of his instruments can penetrate its core. Benjamin Grimm tells Reed to let him take over and then uses his hands to break off part of the outer shell. Inside of the meteor is an organic-looking dehydrated acorn that Reed plans on studying for several months. Sue offers to place it in a freezer, and that's when we learn that the Fantastic Four also use the lab freezer for food. Or maybe they are using the food freezer for lab work. Either way, Johnny's got 2 frozen pizzas set aside for later. Before Reed gets a chance to study the meteor, another adventure begins. The Fantastic Four hear a commotion coming from the streets of New York. Johnny looks out the window where he sees a large, crackling orb floating over the crowd. The police have just arrived on the scene and begin shooting at it, but the bullets seem to have no effect at all. Johnny flies in to investigate while the rest of the Fantastic Four spring into action. Johnny attempts to approach the orb, but its spinning is so fast that the orb throws him into an orbit. Mr. Fantastic wraps himself around the orb in an attempt to contain it. He successfully surrounds the orb, but it continues to move right through him like a ghost passing through a wall. Ben, showing no considerations for the citizens of New York, pulls up a water line and attempts to use it as a fire hose on the glowing orb. For the trouble, all he gets is a wet face as the orb turns the spray of water back upon the thing. Meanwhile, Mr. Fantastic chastises Ben over the cost of the water main that they'll have to reimburse the city for. Sue assumes that the orb can't detect her in her invisible form, so she uses a rod in an attempt to learn about the orb's composition. As the rod touches the orb, Sue is pulled inside of the orb. Not thinking of the danger, the rest of the Fantastic Four rush in behind her. Once they touch the orb, they discover that it is a portal to a pocket dimension with the Watcher inside. Once inside, the Watcher apologizes for his drastic methods, but he needed to discuss a menace to the galaxy that he thinks only the Fantastic Four are capable of defeating. Before he gives them the scoop, the Watcher points out that he knows he is breaking his oath of non-interference, but the danger is so great that even he and his fellow Watchers are in danger. The vibe I'm getting from this is the concern isn't really about humans, it's more about him and his people. This is the second time that the Watcher has broken his oath to help the Fantastic Four. I discussed the first time in my video on the Watcher's first appearance in the link above. The oath hasn't been broken, it's been shattered. Look at the amount of trouble the Watcher's glowing orb stunt brought to the lives of countless people in New York City. All because he doesn't want to leave the house? He watches all the time but can't figure out how mail or telephones work? Surely he could have found some less intrusive way to talk with the Fantastic Four. Reed wants to know the who, what, and how of anything that can threaten the universe. The Watcher points to and shows our heroes a scrawny and ridiculous-looking laboratory technician and tells the Fantastic Four that this is the man who has the power to destroy worlds. Ben laughs it off, thinking that maybe they are being put on. This line rubs me wrong and makes me think that Ben has forgotten about his scrawny but intelligent teammate Reed Richards, who brings both brains and action to the table. The Watcher has the Fantastic Four watch his projecto image for an explanation. The lab tech we are shown works for Atomic Corp. He's complaining about his status within the company, the fact that he doesn't make enough money while the bosses make more than enough, and the fact that he doesn't have options to go work anywhere else. Not having his mind on his work leads the disgruntled lab tech into making a slight mistake, which leads to him having a workplace accident. A 1,000,000,000,000 chance allows the technician to survive the atomic blast, which has left marks that look like lightning bolts across his face. As he gets up, the technician feels different. The next morning, the technician is called into a manager's office. The man behind the desk doesn't even know the technician's name, but lets him know that due to his carelessness, he's going to be fired from the company. The lab tech has worked at Atomic Corp for the last 12 years and is upset that after all this time, he's getting fired. More upsetting to him is that after all the hard work he's put into building things for Atomic Corp, management never bothered to learn his name. He raises his fist to his former boss, telling him he's now one of the most powerful beings to ever live. It's only now that the manager sees the lab tech's scarred face. The technician wears his scarred face as a point of pride, a face to be feared. Before leaving, the lab technician shows us what he can do. He pulls out a wand and makes ice form throughout the room. To the manager, it seems as though the ice came out of nowhere. But the lab tech tells us that he did this. He controlled the molecules in the air and made them form into ice. In fact, he can now control every molecule in the universe, meaning he can do almost anything he wants. An unknown, lowly lab technician has become the all-powerful Molecule Man. Back with the Fantastic Four and the Watcher, Reed gives the group a middle school lesson in chemistry by explaining what a molecule is and notes that if their enemy can control molecules, then he can control anything. This is the reason why the Watcher wants him stopped. The Watcher then clams up, letting us know that he'll say no more, and that he's already stayed too long within the ephemeral sphere. Perhaps the most hypocritical thing he says is, "I am powerless to act, only to watch." He says this as he's in the middle of acting. Ridiculous. He then returns the Fantastic Four to their dimension, and the blue sphere fades away. Once they are out on the street, the Fantastic Four are faced with a massive problem. The Baxter building is gone. All of it. In its place is a gaping hole. Sue gives us a quick recap of events, while the Thing and the Human Torch both wonder why the streets are empty. Reed, wide-eyed in amazement, has found the answer. Everybody is flocking to Times Square. The Thing doesn't believe what he sees. The entirety of the Baxter building has been moved into Times Square. From the ledge surrounding the 4th floor, a man addresses the crowd. From his makeshift pulpit, he demands that the people give him silence or he will topple the building upon them. Once they quiet down, he makes it clear that any future commands are to be obeyed at once and without question. He goes on to claim that every man-made law is repealed, along with all rules and regulations. Moving forward, there are no laws, only orders given by the Molecule Man. As one might imagine, the Fantastic Four have other plans, and Reed tells Molecule Man that his plan won't work as long as the Fantastic Four are alive. Molecule Man calls Reed a fool, while pointing out all he needs to do is use his wand, and then he gives a demonstration. He turns a wall of bricks into a whirling bladed fan. Reed is capable of freeing himself faster than the villain expects, but the Molecule Man seems unfazed by this. He then creates 2 giant magnets in the air, one positive and one negative, and he uses them to hold Reed Richards in place. Since the magnets have opposite charges, they go flying apart from one another. Wait, that doesn't make sense. I'm more surprised that they don't just flip over and stick together. Molecule Man must be holding them in place. It is fun to see the magnets stretching out Mr. Fantastic. The Human Torch flies in to assist Reed. Torch breaks apart the magnets by shooting them with fireballs. Apparently they weren't fireproof magnets, as Johnny points out. Okay, but they were magnets. So what did the Molecule Man make them out of that is extremely magnetic and burns easily? Anyway, the Thing catches Reed as he falls to the ground while the Torch flies in to confront the Molecule Man. A factoid I love. Human Torch lets us know that Molecule Man's voice sounds like Bela Lugosi on The Late Show. I wish we were told what more heroes and villains sounded like. Love it. As the Torch comes in close, Molecule Man erects a fireproof shield around himself. Johnny ups his game and attempts to disrupt the shield with a white-hot Nova fireball. Instead of disrupting the fireball or reinforcing the shield, the Molecule Man goes airborne by placing a spring under his shield and launching himself into the air. He then turns his shield into a parachute to glide back down to the city streets. Now that Molecule Man is on the ground, the Thing wants his turn. He rushes in, but before the Thing can reach the Molecule Man, he uses his wand to raise the roadway, sending the Thing tumbling back the other direction. The ease with which he's defeating the Fantastic Four draws laughter from the Molecule Man. Reed Richards is planning on stretching over the wall of roadway, and Reed makes the mistake of calling the substance cement. And you'll have to forgive me for this aside, but I have an engineering degree with a focus on concrete, so this is a bit of a pet peeve and a mistake a scientist like Reed Richards would never make. The roadway is not cement, although it may have cement in it. The road is going to be concrete, asphalt, or perhaps brick pavers, but roads are never made from straight cement. Cement is an ingredient in concrete like flour is an ingredient in bread. You wouldn't bake bread with just flour and water, and building roads out of cement is just as ignorant. There is no way Molecule Man would have built a wall of cement because it wouldn't have had any structural integrity. Not to mention that at this time, the roads in Times Square are made out of asphalt and not concrete in the first place. Fortunately, we have pictures to prove this. Moving on. Ben doesn't listen to Reed and crashes through the lifted roadway. Molecule Man shows off his powers by pulling the electricity from the nearby marquee and uses it to give the Thing an electrical shock. Luckily for the Thing, he's standing near an open manhole and is capable of diving in for an escape. Molecule Man points out that the sewers are nowhere to hide. He then uses his wand to wrap the pipes beneath the street all around the Thing. It doesn't take long before he's completely encapsulated in metal. And real quick, I'll just flash back to the panel where the Thing was belittling the Molecule Man for his appearances. That scrawny little feller just kicked his butt. The Human Torch must have entered through another manhole. He flies down the sewer looking for the Thing. Upon finding him, he melts away the pipes and frees the Thing. I was going to say, good thing Molecule Man stopped watching, but in the next panel we see that he's still standing at the entrance of the sewer. Sue is afraid of what will happen when Ben and Johnny come out, but seriously, if he wanted to kill them off, he could just as easily have the entire street entomb them right now. Sue and Reed team up to take the Molecule Man out. The plan is Reed is going to distract the Molecule Man, while Sue uses her invisibility to sneak up and steal his wand. As they run in, Reed gets as much of the Molecule Man's attention as possible. Molecule Man uses his wand to break apart a nearby building, sending each of the bricks hurtling towards Mr. Fantastic. Sue gets close enough to grab at the wand, but when she tries to wrest it away from him, the Molecule Man's grip proves too strong. Immediately, he knows it must be the Invisible Woman. He makes newspapers fly forth from a nearby newsstand, wrapping themselves around her. Sue immediately begins sobbing over her failure while Mr. Fantastic reaches out and pulls her to safety. Ben helps remove the papers from Sue while Johnny moves in to produce a wall of Aurora flame. Johnny knows that his attempt is useless, but he hopes that it'll buy the Fantastic Four enough time to escape. The distraction works, and the Fantastic Four are capable of running away. Of note, we are given a panel where the public sours on the Fantastic Four after seeing them run off. And why not? They just started a massive fight, a massive fire, and left. In order to put out the Torch's wall of flame, Molecule Man empties a nearby rooftop watering tower. Afterwards, the Molecule Man attempts to assert control over the city once more, but now local law enforcement interrupt him, approaching with guns drawn from behind the Molecule Man. He turns, wand in hand, to mock them for not catching on to how powerless they are. Molecule Man is ordered to drop the wand, and the police open fire, but the Molecule Man makes a wall of solid air between himself and the bullets. You have to love this image. The Fantastic Four with tails between their legs riding the subway. One has to wonder who was hiding the fare and where were they hiding their fare at? They get off at the next station and attempt to head for the streets in order to avoid gathering a crowd. Back at Times Square, Molecule Man begins his third attempt to assert control over the city. He claims that the entire city is his hostage until somebody brings him the Fantastic Four. In an attempt to enforce this order, the Molecule Man makes it so that nobody can enter or leave the city. He encloses all of New York within a glass cage, porous enough for air to pass through, but nothing else. The change is immediately spotted by the United States Air Force. Out on the streets of the city, the Fantastic Four attempt to hide while the citizens of New York search for them. The team is spotted as somebody calls for the Thing to follow him. It doesn't take long for the fellow to point out that the Fantastic Four have found themselves on Yancey Street. And as one of the Yancey Street gang members puts it, they want the Thing for themselves, not somebody else getting him. To ensure this, the group is transported through the city in a horse and buggy to Alicia Masters' studio apartment. Reed says the team can't stay long. While the rest of the Fantastic Four sit, drinking tea and pouting, Reed is ready to come up with a new way to attack the Molecule Man's weakness. The team wants to know what he means by weakness. Reed then points out that the Molecule Man, it seems that he can't affect organic molecules. Everything he's moved so far has been inanimate, like bricks or air. Reed uses Alicia's statues as another example before exclaiming that that's the answer. He then turns to Alicia and asks her to model up 4 statues as quickly as possible. Later in the day, after the assignment is complete, a flare is fired from Alicia's apartment, signaling for the Fantastic Four to spring into action, but intended to attract the Molecule Man. Molecule Man has turned the air around him into a slide and slides his way into Alicia's apartment. He knows that this is where the flare came from and wants Alicia to tell him where the Fantastic Four are. Before they do that, Alicia wants to show him a statue she's created. He turns and sees the 4 statues of the Fantastic Four. Molecule Man thinks it's clever and then moves to rearrange the statue's molecules. But when he does so, he discovers that the stone won't follow his commands. Reed Richards speaks up, telling him that the reason why is they aren't stone. They are the real Fantastic Four, hiding under a coating of plaster. Attempting to use his powers on organic matter creates a force feedback loop that is too powerful for the Molecule Man to endure. In the process, he drops his wand. He commends the Fantastic Four for finding his weakness, but going forward, he will refuse to give them any pity. He just needs to reach that wand. Before he can do so, the Fantastic Four spring into action. Behind the Molecule Man, the crackling orb portal of the Watcher shows up once more as Reed grabs the wand. Just like Susan was drawn in previously, the Molecule Man is drawn in now. Afterwards, the sphere begins glowing brighter, and from it, the Watcher returns. Wait, why didn't he just do that the first time? The Watcher claims that he could not interfere in the battle while it was taking place, but now that the Fantastic Four won, he's going to take Molecule Man away somewhere where he won't be a problem again. He does recognize that that's still interfering, right? The Watcher finishes this up by sucking up to the Fantastic Four once more, feeding their egos by calling them the greatest group of evil fighters and that their nation, no, the entire planet, should be proud of them. Then, the Watcher fades away. After he leaves, Susan wonders where he took the Molecule Man, while Reed Richards just hopes he never escapes. I'm not saying that the Molecule Man came across as a nice guy, but that's kind of a blasé approach to an American citizen being abducted by an alien entity. And who is going to remove that giant glass dome over all of New York City? What about the Baxter Building being in the middle of Times Square? The lack of resolution in this issue is frustrating. In the final panel, we see Reed stating that all that remains of the Molecule Man is his wand. Yeah, except for all of those problems I just mentioned. This is 2 comics in a row now that I've covered that were written by Stan Lee. Both have great characters and fun fight scenes, but again, the nuts and bolts of the plot just don't hold up. By all accounts, the Watchers should have removed the Molecule Man from the scene without having to involve the Fantastic Four, and as long as that's the case, waiting until the fight is over is just a dick move. One thing to note in this issue, and I've made certain not to mention his name because of this, the Molecule Man's name is not revealed here. He gets upset at his boss for not knowing his name, but then we, the reader, aren't told his name until a future issue. I also glossed over the Molecule Man's accident, as there are multiple explanations and retcons as to what actually took place that day, and I'll cover those as they arise. I usually don't bring up the letters page of the comics I talk about, but this one deserves a special mention. In it, we hear from Secretary of the Fantastic Four Fan Club, the great Mark Gruenwald, and I'll leave you, the viewer, with this little letter from future fantasy writer George R. Martin. Thanks for joining me for another episode of Cosmic Comics. Feel free to hit any of the buttons below. I'm out.